Any
All
second
right.
now.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Is that showing live on your side?
Yes, I see live. Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, good
We
morning.
are
Have
live.
another little bit of a technical glitch this morning.
Well, I'm glad you know what you're doing. If I did it, I wouldn't even know if I did it right or wrong. So appreciate you and Jenny always taking care of those kind of things, and I don't have to. So
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Well, I'm so excited this morning. We've got Representative Sherrie Conley coming on, and I didn't even know when we first invited her to be on the show. She was at Moms for Liberty conference last week, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But she also has been to a conference from Seattle, and we want to talk about that too, because they are steering the ship and getting stuff passed in Washington, D.C. But
Yeah.
anyway, let's bring Sherrie on and get this party started.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning. So good to see
Morning,
you
Sherrie.
this morning.
Good to see you all too. You guys look fantastic. Did you have a good 4th? Independence Day? It's not 4th,
Yes,
it's Independence Day.
I was as independent as I could have possibly been. I just stayed home and chilled.
Yeah.
Now,
Worked in my garden.
I made it a point to, because we were talking to my kids yesterday about Independence Day. I said, I almost want to call that Insurgent Day, or even Insurrectionist Day, because that's almost to the point that we are again. We need to take some serious action for this country. We had a nice conversation yesterday with my kids on that.
Yeah.
Yes. I always, my favorite part of the Declaration of Independence is the part that says, it is your right, it is your duty to throw off the tyrants. I was like, I mean, that's not a quote, but long story, that's in a nutshell. And I was like, it is
The
our
intent.
duty. It is our duty
Yeah.
to throw off tyrants.
Well, you know, I taught 5th grade social studies most of my career as an educator. And of course, you know, 5th grade social studies is the founding of America. You start with the, 1609 or
right.
It's been a while, and talk about, the first settlers that came over, and then you talk about the 13 colonies and that sort of thing. And I wish now that I would have used the founding documents to teach that. After being in Philadelphia this week, I realized I have always been, very patriotic. But having visited now the cradle of liberty, it was very emotional for me. We got to go into Independence Hall, and, you stand there in that building and you think, George Washington was in this room. Benjamin Franklin was in this room. Alexander Hamilton, Jefferson, all of those guys, they stood in that room and created, thought up, pinned and created, the Declaration of Independence. And it was very, very emotional for me to be there. And now I look at it and I think this should be a requirement of every American in the United States to go to Philadelphia and see where it all started. I had a little brief conversation with some young people at one of the visitor centers, and we had asked him a question about something about where we wanted to go next. And he was like, you know what? I don't know. I haven't been over there, because I think the person that was with me, it was Kendra Wesson. She said, so what's over in that other building? And the young man said, I don't know. I've never been over there. It was the Constitution Center. And I said, how long have you lived here? And he goes, well, I'm 22. And I said, you're 22. You grew up here. You've never been in that building over there. No, I've never been there. I said, okay, I said, I'm not getting on to you. I said, I'm not, but I want you to think about something. I said, if our founding fathers, those 56, 57 signers of that declaration had not done what they did on this very soil, then she and I would not have the freedom right now to travel to Philadelphia to see where it all started. He said, I never thought of it that way. And I was like, please do me a favor. Go visit the Constitution Center. Go visit Independence Hall. Go learn about the history of your city and of your nation. And he was like, yeah, I think I'll do that. And I thought, okay, I need to talk to every young person in this city and all across the nation and tell that story. They need to be, everybody needs to go visit there. It was amazing. Very moving.
Well, I want to talk about the Moms for Liberty conference, but you were telling me just a little bit earlier about a Seattle conference that you've been to recently, where they are influencing policy in the entire United States, which, quite frankly, none of this should be happening for the entire this one size fits all.
Yep.
Is wrong. It is wrong, wrong. And so tell us a little bit about what you found out at the Seattle conference.
Okay. So, Washington has been very, very progressive for a long time. And, if you look at the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, they really have been, they think it's innovative. It's progressive. It's really going in the wrong direction. It's not the direction that we want to go at all, especially here in Oklahoma and in the red states. But so the very first breakout session that we had, there were a couple of young ladies that were boasting, really, truly trying to sell us on some technology. The technology was for 3 to 4 or 5-year-old pre-K age children, and using this little wand. I think it had something to do with like pointing into a book, and it's books that all of us have used, Chicka Chicka Boom Boom and some others. And so, they're trying to use books that all of the classrooms use. And the more they talked, and of course, they were saying that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is the one who is actually funding the development of this curriculum. And so I listened to what they had to say. And one of the questions that I had was, okay, so how often are you wanting the pre-K teachers and the kindergarten and even the daycare, childcare centers, how often are you wanting them to use this technology? And they said, oh, every other month. And, what they're doing is they're wanting to assess the students where they're at. So,
At 3.
At
3 years old.
At 3. And I'm thinking a 3-year-old needs to be playing. A 3-year-old needs to be learning how to tie their shoes. A 3-year-old needs to be, learning how to, engage with their peers. And that's where kids learn how to cooperate and to just to navigate their world. And so, I just sat there really kind of starting to fume the whole time. And so they gave us an opportunity to have a table talk. And I sat listening to the others at the table and, what their comments were. And they were like, oh, well, this is a great idea. And, the teachers need to know, and that's going to free up their time if the kids are doing the assessments on their own. And I said, okay, so I'm just going to tell you, I am 100% against this technology. Yeah. And, I proceeded to tell them about a book that I've read called Hollowed Out. If you have not read it, if those of you listening have not read it, I highly, highly recommend it. The hollowing out of our youth is about basically them not having anything up here. They have nothing here and they have nothing in their soul. They're not being taught how to engage with their teachers. They're not being taught how to engage with their peers. And you think about this as an adjunct professor at a college in Bethany. My teacher candidates are telling me that they're going into elementary classrooms with pre-emerging readers, kindergartners, and they're sitting on a computer for 90 minutes, and that computer is supposed to be teaching them how to read. And my biggest concern, and this is what I told the legislators in Washington, and they were there from other states as well, and I told them, is like, if you've got a child that is sitting on a computer, they're not engaging with their peers and with the teacher. Number one, the teacher's not learning where those students are. They're not getting a good grasp about where they are and doing those, formative assessments that you just do real quick on the spot. And in that process, if they do it by themselves, the teacher has no opportunity to do the correction or the teacher moments. We talk about, in the education world, we talk about teaching moments. And those are those little moments that happen when you're engaging with your students, and the students are engaging with each other, for you to be able to teach something that isn't necessarily on the lesson plan. And so you're robbing children of that. You're robbing teachers of that opportunity, especially if they're trying to assess their skills, because teachers can ask questions to guide them. Anyway, so that's what I was telling all of them, is like, teachers are not going to know their students. Part of it being a good teacher is building relationships with your children. And if they're on the computer all the time, there's no relationship building going on at all. You have no classroom management control, none of that. And if a parent asks you, how is your child doing? You can't answer that question, because you have to go see the data in order to be able to answer that question. That's not being a teacher, that's being a facilitator.
Right. And a 3-year-old, that's what that comes across as rejection. So they're literally causing mental health issues in these kiddos.
Yeah. And they're wondering why they think they have to teach SEL, social emotional learning. And that's because we're robbing them of the opportunity to engage with other children. If they are from a single child home and they come to a child care center, and that's the only interaction that they get with peers, other than maybe family members or neighbor, kids every once in a while, then they're not going to have any socialization. They're not going to know how to treat another child. They're not going to know how to share. Right. And we are robbing and hollowing out our children by putting them on so much technology.
Well, and especially, if you've got kids in a room and you're teaching them not to talk to one another, that's exactly the opposite thing of what they need to know.
That's right.
They need to. I remember when mine were little, we read books all the time, and if I was busy doing something else and I'm getting the mommy, if I would stop and pay attention to them for, a quick minute, or maybe sit down and read one of the books, or, something like that, then they would be good to go again and go entertain themselves and play with themselves or each other when I had to, and for another hour, but then they want mama, yeah. And that's okay, but they need attention,
Well, so you think about littles, and I use the example of children that come from a Hispanic culture or a Latina culture, that when they come into pre-K at 4 years old, the majority of them have no English at all. And so, the pre-K teacher, the kindergarten teacher, is so busy trying to teach them the basics that they need to even be able to function in the classroom. They're behind when they get there. And so, where did everybody go?
I don't know.
They're already behind. Yeah, they're already behind they're already behind when they get there. And, I just, if you're throwing them on a computer and trying to teach them through a computer system, they're not getting that engagement and that one-on-one, that human touch, like what you're saying about, your children at home. They need that. They crave that. We are let's see, what's the term? We are social creatures.
Yes.
The human race is a social group. And, we are not meant to be isolated. We are meant to be with people. And so that there's more to the hollowing out thing than just that. But I mean, that's where it starts. If you've got your kids on a computer 90 minutes a day for reading and then 90 minutes for math, and they're not getting any interaction between their, engaging with their peers and engaging with their teacher, we are robbing them of communication skills. And we wonder why, our youth are lacking the soft skills that they need in order to be able to hold down a job. It's no wonder.
Well, and we
Yeah.
shouldn't try to warehouse kids from the time they're born or by the time they're potty trained. That's just, that's cruel. It's actually
It's like a conveyor belt. It's like like a manufacturing plant. It's really sad that's, what they're trying to push. And we've got to do everything we can to push back and make sure that doesn't happen. No matter what type of setting that they're being educated in, we've got to make sure that it doesn't happen.
And
Yeah,
so that's, go ahead,
well,
Michael.
well, one thing, there's such a, I don't know if it's a disconnection with parents or just, I don't even know the right way to even maybe describe it, but you just see, Sherrie, like so many parents, they just go to the store, they give their kid their phone, or they're at some place and they have an iPad, or, they're just so disconnected from, I don't even want to say just from their family, but just that human social kind of aspect.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, like during my campaign, I constantly said, I want to get the technology necessarily out of these kindergarten, first, second, third grade classrooms to where they're doing actual activities and reading and just coloring and doing things like that rather than clicking buttons, on an iPad. And I had parents that were like, I want my kid, doing that stuff. And I'm like, well, you can do that yourself, at home or somewhere else. But I think you need to have that creative aspect to their brain to where they're creating the stories and the colors and all this, it's not being provided to them. So I don't know how we break that cycle, because parents just seem to keep allowing their kids to have such, huge amounts of their time with that technology every day.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's what I was going to say is that, back several years ago, before iPads and, all the game consoles and stuff, the TV was the babysitter. And now, it's come down to cell phones and iPads are now being used as a babysitter. And rather than teaching your child how to behave, you hand them, some kind of electronic and device and get them to be quiet that way. They don't learn self-management. They don't learn how to, regulate their emotions, and they're not taught no. And that's the reason why the teachers are having so much trouble. Why the behavior is so bad in the classrooms is because they come to school and teachers expect them to, behave, expect them to mind, expect them to, follow the classroom procedures, and they're not being made to do that at home in some cases. And so it just creates havoc. And you have 2 or 3 kids in the classroom that have no self-regulation, and that will create chaos for the rest of the kids in the classroom. You are those 3 or 4 children can absolutely disrupt the flow of the classroom and learning for all of the other kids, and that's tragic. And then, of course, there's other issues too, but we've got that program PBIS, which in some cases, some of the stuff that PBIS does. I mean, I did some PBIS in my classroom, restorative justice type circles, where we talked about behaviors, and we talked about, we did talk about feelings in my classroom some, but it was more about, hey, you just called somebody this, and why did you call that person that name? And we talked about that, and we said, do you want somebody calling you names? Do you want, they made a mistake. They said something, that they shouldn't have said to you. And now you've said something that you shouldn't have said to them. And now here we are having to sit here and have this conversation. And so I did use it a little bit. But some of it is there's another book called Why Meadow Died. I haven't read it yet, but there's a young girl that died in a school shooting. And the research behind it says that PBIS was part of the problem and is part of the problem that we're seeing today with our young people, that they're not getting sent to the principal's office because the teachers are being expected to handle even the severest of the discipline issues in their classroom. And because it doesn't go get reported to admin, and admin doesn't take note of it, then, those kids just keep going on. And if they have some kind of need for intervention behavior wise, then, they get to the point where they absolutely have no self-regulation, and they end up, shooting up a school. So there's some bad things out there, and they're being used. There's some good things out there that are being used in bad ways, and it's creating more problems for teachers and for kids than it is doing the good work that it should be doing.
Right. Well, that's what Dana was just saying. Some of the things used can be good, but it's the lens through which they are taught that makes them bad. And that's exactly right.
Absolutely. So anyway, those are the things that they were pushing out there in Washington. And, Washington is very, very progressive. And I just, it's very concerning to me when someone stands up and they talk about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funding it. And, then expecting the child care centers to use those programs. And one of the questions for me was, well, if you're expecting them to use this, then how are you going to pay for that? How are they going to pay for it if you're going to expect them to use it? And then another question was asked of it, and they said, well, it'll be rolled out in 18 months. And so I thought, okay, so you're asking us what we think about it, but now you're telling us that it's going to go whether we want it or not. And so it just makes me wonder, in 18 months, prayerfully, we'll have a new president that will not be for these things, and we can roll back some of these bad decisions that are being made under this current administration and get some of the stuff.
As far as Fed Ed, it just makes me go through the roof that our educators are more interested in getting federal dollars at any cost than to raising our children in healthy, physical, mental, academic. Nobody even hardly talks about academics in school setting anymore.
Right.
And, sorry, you're missing the whole point if we can't get to the academics part of it.
Yeah. There's there's some bad things that have been pushed through the federal government that has some really bad strings attached to it. And I go back to one of the first ones that we saw, and that was the food program that Michelle Obama started pushing. And now you go into a school, unless the school has completely separated themselves from the USDA food program, the food is garbage and the kids do not eat it. Even the hungry kids. The majority of my teaching career in the last several years has been in Oklahoma City public schools. And even those kids that come in there that have limited access to food at home, they don't eat that food at school. They get it on their tray because they're made to, and the tray sits in front of them, and they may pick at the piece of bread or whatever might be considered edible, the fruit on the tray, and then everything else goes in the trash. And so it is a waste of federal dollars. And I've talked to one school up in I'm trying to remember what school district it was, but had a conversation with a school board member. It's up north somewhere by Kingfisher, I think. And he said, yeah, we completely stopped taking federal dollars for our food program. And I said, well, how did you fund it? And he said, well, we just made the decision as a school board that we were going to find the money in our budget to stop taking those dollars so that we could control what our children were eating. And I think there's several that are doing that now. I believe Washington public schools, I believe that they aren't following. I'd have to do some digging, but from what I can tell, they are not going off of the requirements that the federal government puts on schools. So they may be paying for their own food there too. So I'd be interested to see actually how many Oklahoma public schools have gotten off of federal food program so that they can control what their students are eating.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Also,
Yeah.
I mean, there is no reason to have the Department of Ed, the federal Department of Ed. Yeah. No reason. They need to go away and let Oklahoma have Oklahoma values. And even though those are being corrupted so fast, but yeah, if the smaller schools can find the money, I guarantee you that the bigger schools can.
Yeah.
We've just got to get away from that. But educators get so mad. Now, that's one of the things that Ryan Walters has brought up is if it's not a good program, we're not going to take it. And they're like money, money, money. Like that's the only thing that matters, and it's not. And I'm surprised because I'm surprised that our educators are so easily led down that path.
Well, they're unfortunately
not all.
Not all of them are, and unfortunately, the ones that are not doing their the research on their own, and they're listening to some of these other groups that are feeding them information. That those other groups are being deceptive. They may be telling half truths, or I'm not going to say they're lying, which some of them may. I'm not going to call them liars, but if teachers would just do their due diligence and start asking questions, I mean, they could reach out to the State Department and go, okay, tell me which of these programs you're not coming out with. And I've had conversations with Superintendent Walters about communicating to Oklahomans about the different programs and the reason why we don't want those programs. One of the other things, in fact, I talked to him at Moms for Liberty, and one of the things that he said was that some of the grant programs that are available are actually applied for by the high schools. Some of them are applied for by higher ed. Some of them are applied for by the career techs. And if the State Department of Education applied for all of those grants, it would not allow some of those other education groups and divisions to be able to get the money. And that's just taking money from other pockets, and that's not really the way to do it. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about happy things like the Moms for Liberty conference and some of your experience. And yay, Janice. Tell me first about the award that Janice won that you got to be there for. I was so excited for her.
Yeah, it was incredible. I knew that she had been nominated for that, and she was one out of 3 that made the final cut for the nomination. So I was so excited to get to be there with her. It was amazing. We were sitting at the table, and when they called out her name, she does this and covers her face. I mean, she was just overwhelmed. She really had no idea that she was going to win. And it was just so amazing to be there with her and see her get to accept that award. And, she's very, very humble. And but she is a fierce, joyful warrior.
She is. And she's a hard worker. Goodness, she goes to so many school board meetings. I think I would go cross-eyed.
Yeah. She won, the award she won was for innovation. And so, and she has done that. She has done an amazing job in growing that chapter. And it's been fun to watch her over the last couple of years and see her grow as an advocate for kids and parents, and to watch her grow that chapter and get to know all of those moms up there. There's some really amazing women that are engaged up there in the Tulsa County chapter. And so it's been really fun. It was fun to watch her and see her get that. And the award was beautiful. I don't know if you guys have seen a picture of it or not. We'll have to make sure that Janice takes a picture of it and puts it on her social media pages, because it is beautiful. It's a Liberty Bell, and it really actually rings. And I mean, it just is fantastic. Yeah.
Well,
so that was fun.
Well, and you told me earlier that you had joined the Moms for Liberty, the national, a while back. As soon as you learned about them, pretty much.
Yeah. I joined. Yeah, it's been. I'd have to go back and look. I don't recall exactly when it was that I joined the chapter, but as soon as I saw Tiffany and Tina on an interview and heard what they were fighting for, I thought, this is a group that I can, that I can be involved with. And so I joined, and then I don't even know. I met Janice because I went up with a state school board member to meet with some people in Bristow. Is that where she's from?
Yeah.
Bristow. And have a conversation about some books that they had in the library that they had decided that they were not going to pull out of the library at the high school or the junior high. And so that's how I met her. And it was an instant connection. We were like, okay, yeah, we are totally on the same page. We are fighting for the same things. And so that's it's been a kind of almost a 2-year friendship, I think, that we have built through that. And then, of course, I went up and spoke to Moms for Liberty at Christmas this past year, and got to know some of the moms up there. And it really is an incredible group. Tiffany and Tina actually started. There was another young lady that started with them. I think her name is Rachel, maybe. She's not with the group anymore, but they're out of Florida. They started in a back room in an home office, the two of them, and $500. And that was in 2021. And now they are 120,000 members strong across. It is incredible, across the nation. 2 years in, 120,000 members. They honored Pennsylvania at the summit because Pennsylvania has 26 chapters in their state, and the only other state that has more, the only other state that has more is Florida, and of course, that's where it originated from. So it's growing. There were 650. It was 700 actually. They were limited. They were capped at 700. They could have had more people come to the summit, but they were limited because of the hotel space. And so yeah, it was incredible. I mean, you have to figure how much political power does a group have if you've got 5 presidential candidates come speak. 18 months from. It is 18 months out from the general election for the president in 2024. And you've got 5 presidential candidates show up. So it's going to be a power to be reckoned with over the next 18 months, I believe.
And their goal is only to protect their children from things that should not be happening in the education system. And for that, they've been labeled a hate group, which is hilarious because it's just so ridiculous. The group that's here in Canadian County, Dana Mooney is their fearless leader, and she's amazing. She is amazing. They do all the research. I mean, they do this on their own time with their own dime.
All volunteer.
Yeah, it's all volunteer, and I love the moms there. I go just because I love all the moms that are doing this. These are my people, that are just trying to raise their children in a good world. And they're, as fast as they're growing, this could be what turns the ship, because the ship has got to turn around, or we're sunk. And
I made a comment, Sherrie, to Dana last week that the thing I love the most about Moms for Liberty, especially that group, is it's like a renaissance, really, where that group never existed before. There wasn't really a need for it. And now you have this force that is Moms for Liberty, and it's here. And it just gives me so much hope that things, people are waking up and becoming active and being concerned and wanting to do something. It just makes me excited to see that.
Yeah, it really is incredible. I mean, I'm really impressed with a lot of the moms, you, Julia, and Jenny, and I've got a lot of moms down here that have been homeschooling their children for several years because they saw it. And I was in the public school when I got my teaching degree and decided to be a teacher. And then, of course, my oldest was old enough to start thinking about going to school. I started praying about it. Lord, where do you want me? Do you want my kids in a private school, or do you want them in a public school? And, do you want me to teach in a public school? Where do you want me to go? What am I supposed to do here? And so I just felt, scripture tells us that we're not supposed to hide our light under a basket. And so I took myself and I took my children into public school and tried to do the best that I could in making sure that what I was doing at home would be reflected in the way they were at school. And, kids are not going to be perfect. I know that. But I just prayed that my children would get what they needed at home so that they didn't have to have those things come from their teacher and from the people at school, And, but what's incredible to me is that I look now at the people who have homeschooled because they saw downstream what was happening. And, and I said to some people at a school in Oklahoma City one time, I was standing talking with some other educators, and I said, well, you just wait. This is around 2007, 2008, maybe, sometime around there. I said, well, you just wait. I said, one of these days, everything that we get is going to be scripted, and they're going to tell us what we're supposed to say. They're going to tell us when we're supposed to say it. They're going to tell us what the questions are and what the responses should be. And there will be no creativity in classroom anymore. That's where it's going to go. And of course, they were all like, oh, that's not going to happen. Well, what's happening now? Exactly that. We're the teachers are being told exactly what to say. And so I admire those parents that pulled their kids out and started homeschooling them, a long time ago because they saw downstream what was coming. And so now I look back and I think, as an educator, I was there, I was in the thick of it. And I mean, to be honest, I bought into a lot of that stuff. You get brainwashed. And what is incredible to me is how it inch by inch, is the way it's come in. And I look back now at some of the things that I was being told that I subscribed to, that now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I was buying all of that. And now I am so thankful that I'm awake and that I understand what the goal is long-term. Right. And that and a lot of parents were asleep, just like I was being in that environment. Parents fell asleep. Parents got to where they're like, especially here in Oklahoma, because, the majority of us are conservative, at least we have been up until here recently. And we didn't think we had anything to worry about. We didn't think that there was anything going on. And then I go back to the parents who looked downstream and saw what was coming and pulled their kids out. And, and I have to admit, I've got some guilt over that. And I tell my kids every once in a while, I'm so sorry that, I didn't do this, or I didn't do that, or that I did this or did that. And my kids are like, Mom, you did a great job raising us. You told us, what to watch for. You told us to be careful. You did all of those things. So stop worrying about that. But Moms for Liberty really is more about empowering parents to understand what they need to do. those moms are not against public school. Now, some of them are homeschoolers, but there's a vast majority of them that are there that their kids are in public schools.
Right.
And they just want the public school system to be what it once was when parents were considered partners and they were allowed. I was, Julia, you and I were talking earlier about my master's degree program as an administrator. And one of the things that you're taught as an administrator is that your parents are supposed to be partners. They're part of that three-legged school in the community, or stool in the community, that it's parents, it's educators, and it's community. And so, now the parents are being pushed out, and it's like what we were talking about earlier with Edmond.
Locked out. Yeah.
And even locked out. Yes. And I've had some principals, I've had some superintendents tell me, not a whole bunch, but there have been a few that said, well, we locked parents out at COVID. They couldn't come in for parties. We're not going back to that. We're not going back to letting parents in. And I just think, what happened to parents as being part of that three-legged stool and being part of the equation that all the research points to? Children are going to be more successful if you've got the parents on board. And,
and that action, locking parents out and not letting them in for lunch or for whatever, that sends a message to the students that your parents are dangerous and we are in control of them. And that is the wrong message. That is the anti-family message.
It creates distrust with the community. And the last thing that we want is to not be able to trust the place that we're sending our children for 7 hours a day. And so, that's the reason why I'm in such great support of Moms for Liberty, is because we need the parents involved in the school. We don't need to be shutting them out. And so, we've got to get them back involved, and we've got to get the schools back to where, and I know that because of some of the rhetoric that's out there, there's some distrust on the administrators and the teachers' part. We've got to come back together and know that it's about children. It's like what I was telling you about Edmond, and one of the comments from the Edmond superintendent in the newspaper when the superintendent was confronted about books in the library, and the superintendent's comment immediately was, "There's none of that in Edmond." That was the comment that superintendent made. And I went to COSA and I said, listen, you need to be talking to your administrators, that their conversation with parents and their response to questions doesn't need to be automatically putting up a wall and saying that's not happening here. Their comment needs to be, I don't think that's happening here. I hope it's not happening here. I'm going to do my due diligence to make sure that it's not happening here. But if I find something, you have my word that I will remove it. And that's not the response that parents are getting from principals and from superintendents. And if they would respond to parents' questions that way, the trust would return. And then they wouldn't be doing the FOIA request. They wouldn't feel the need to have to ask for documentation of, if they're not being honest about some things, what else are they not being honest about? And that's sad. To me, that is sad.
And why protect people that are why in the world would an adult protect the people that want to bring in pornography? That is just unacceptable, unbelievable to me, that someone that has chosen education would protect the bad guys. And if that has to do with federal dollars, then too bad about the federal dollars. We'll find, like you said, you can find another way and not participate in that.
Yeah. One of the things that I heard is that there are some teachers, some librarians that are ordering the books. There are some librarians that are not ordering the books, but the people above them who are responsible for the purchasing of books are the ones doing it. But then I also heard that there are organizations that are purchasing certain books for the school districts, and they're nonprofit organizations, and they're just donating them too, and they send them to the schools. And if if you're not a librarian, if you are, because like in Oklahoma, we made the mistake several years ago, and I couldn't tell you when it was, but we made the mistake several years ago of removing the requirement that the person running the library had to have credentials. And so if you're just getting books in and you think, oh, well, okay, or if you're being told by your higher up, get those, documented, get the stickers on them and get them out on the shelf, you're going to do what you're told to do. And you're not going to do the due diligence of determining, what these books are and, what the content is, because some of these, some of the book companies and the authors do a really good job of hiding what the book's about. If you don't read it, you don't thumb through it and, or do your research online, and not just from one company. You can't just go to one of the groups that are reviewing the books. You've got to do your due diligence and look at all of the different reviews and make sure that that there's not something questionable in there.
And they've even created organizations that'll give these books awards, and then they call it an award-winning book, and it's still trash, and it's still not the literary value of it is in the toilet. A 2-year-old could, well, my 2-year-old could read it, but but it, and besides that, and this is what nobody ever gets to this part of the discussion, there are so many great books out there. Remember when a book used to have the moral of the story?
Yes.
That is out the window. This stuff has no moral of the story. You can be mindless, and there's no meaning behind it. There's no life lesson to make you a better human being. And there are so many great books that they're being robbed of because this filth is taking up the space.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I've realized in whenever I started teaching at the college as an adjunct professor. One of the research that I started doing, I was teaching a literature class, and it kind of occurred to me that no longer are we asking what's the moral to the story. We're now asking what's the main idea. And so that this goes back to the SEL piece that, in prior years before, when we had more of a classic education model, now that classic education model is completely gone out of schools. But in years past, when we had a classic education model, we used books that had, like you said, they had a moral. They had characters in them that they had struggles. You think about Winnie the Pooh, for example. It sounds so simple, but you had characters in there that all of them had their own different struggles that they had to accomplish. And it was about friendship, and it was about being kind, and it was about, just all these different things that these kids, that a teacher could use those stories to teach all of those social emotional learning pieces that, again, our stories have been hollowed out. And so they're now learning what's the moral to the story, and they're learning facts and opinion. Well, that's questionable, but anyway, they're not being asked anymore. What can you learn from the story? What can you learn from Winnie the Pooh? What can you learn from Christopher Robin? What can you learn from Piglet and Eeyore? Yeah. And Tigger. Look at Tigger. He's your typical ADHD kid in the classroom, right? That's what he represents. And so just so much learning that could be done there, so much human growth and character that can be learned from those stories, and they're just not being used anymore.
Right.
Yeah. It's sad. Again, sadness.
Well, on that point, Sherrie, how many other legislators or even care or even have like your level of understanding when it comes to this kind of stuff? Because you think for us, it's just such a cut and dry issue. Where are they falling down at? How do they justify, what's happened so far?
Well, unfortunately, even some of the educators, obviously I do my research. I do, I am truly a lifelong learner. And so I do what I can to try to educate myself on what the issues are. I talk to teachers, and when they tell me this is what's happening, then I go, okay, why is this happening? What is going on? What has changed in our education system that's causing these things to happen in the classroom? And I've got an article that I wrote about something now that I have started acknowledging, and I want others to acknowledge, is that we've got teachers that now have what I call ATEs. They're adverse teacher experiences, and it's because of the things that they're having to deal with in the classroom because of the way our education system has changed so much, and parenting has changed, and there's so many different facets to it. So the only ones that really know anything about it are the ones that will stop and listen, that will give me the opportunity to talk with them about it and tell them what the issues are, or the ones that are actually doing their own research. And there's a handful there that whenever I talk to them about certain things, they listen. But we've got others that they're more concerned about workforce development in the public education system than they are about ensuring that our kids have a good education. And we should not be pushing work skills on 9th or 9th graders. We need to be making sure that those students have a well-rounded education. And, I even go back to cursive handwriting in elementary school. We're not teaching kids how to do cursive. I listen to employers that say, please make sure that cursive is being taught in every single school. I get kids that come in that I will handwrite a note to them in cursive, asking them to do this, this, and this, while I'm gone to get, part of the job done, and they can't even read my notes. And so, we're there. It's things that nobody's even thinking of. I mean, you hear some people say, well, they don't need to learn how to do cursive because they've got the computer to do all of their typing on, but that is just not realistic.
It's like calculators and math. It's like, put the calculator down. I put my calculators down, unless if it's got to do with money, then I'll check my work to be sure I'm accurate. But I've started doing math problems on paper again because I want that skill.
Well, we specifically teach our kids cursive for the reason that this was my wife's kind of master plan herself. She goes, I want my kids to be able to read the founding documents of this country.
Yes.
She goes, if you can't write and read cursive, then you can't read, the Declaration of Independence.
No, you cannot. Nope, you sure can't. Well, see, there was something I was going to say. I don't remember what it was, but we have gotten away from I go back to the soft skills piece, that if you've got a 9th grader going over to the career tech to learn how to do, electrical work or HVAC or whatever you've got them going over there to do. Well, I understand that those are doing some skill building. But is a 9th grader truly capable of making the decision about what they want to do when they turn 18, 21? I mean, they don't. We need to listen to what we're saying about kids are not fully developed. Their frontal lobe is not fully developed, and they're not ready to make those kind of decisions. And, I sometimes think about, our pre-K and kindergarten classrooms. You think about our books whenever they used to teach kids, or when they were teaching kids how about the alphabet. When my kids went through, and I don't know if they're still doing this, they may still be, some may be and some not. But what did we talk about? When you use the alphabet, A is for astronaut, F is for firefighter, N is for nurse, P is for police. We talked about career development in kindergarten and pre-K. And so when you'd ask a little boy, what do you want to be when you grow up? He would say, I want to be a police officer. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be, an astronaut, one of those things. And now you ask them what they want to be. What do they say? I want to be an influencer.
Yeah. They want to drive their Lambo. They want to show up with their Lambo.
I want to be a pro basketball player.
Right.
Yeah, which
Right.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a pro basketball player. There's nothing wrong with that, but the likelihood of that. Now, I did whenever I was in Oklahoma City as a principal intern. One of the things that I did, I had some young boys that they caused trouble all the time, and they ended up in my office, and we'd have conversations. Be like, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" I don't know, play basketball. It's like, okay, well, so are you going to get into a college that will allow you to play pro ball eventually if you can't read? And they'd be like, no. It's like, okay, then as a fifth grader, as a fourth grader, what do you have to do now in order to be able to maybe make that dream come true? And you just some of those kids don't have people talking to them that way. And we've got to get back to making sure that kids can think for themselves. Because if they can't think for themselves, then what are they going to be? They're going to be dependent. One of the things that Dennis Prager said the other day at Moms for Liberty, and some of you may have seen it. Hang on. I want to make sure I quote this correctly. Because I was like, yeah, that is exactly right. I mean, I was so impressed by that I was like, okay, I've got to put that on my Facebook page. Hang on. Give me a second.
All right.
He said, liberty is not a value. Liberty is a value, not an instinct. The human instinct is to be taken care of, not free. And so,
That's true.
Yeah.
we've got to make sure that we are teaching our kids about freedom and what it's going to take to keep that freedom. And yes, making sure that they have job skills is part of them being free. But you've got to teach them how to think and why freedom is important. And if they can't reason and think for themselves, then they're never gonna know that. They're never gonna understand that.
And if you can think and reason, and you have, the skills that come with learning how to do cursive writing, music, art, those kind of things, then you can create and be an asset to an employer and learn from them until you can launch out on your own and create your own business. Or what, the sky's the limit if you have thinking skills, not 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 this do what we say, how we say, when we say, which is what they're teaching now so often. And plus,
Places.
the
Some don't even
teachers,
realize that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
right? And the teachers, so many of the amazing creative teachers have left the industry because
Yeah.
they're being, it's such an insult for these wonderful teachers to be taught to be told, say this on this day, say this on this day, say this on, when the kids would be learning lots more and having lots more fun if their teacher, if they just let them go, let them teach. And I mean, I know a whole bunch of great teachers that are
Have
shaking their
left.
heads, but they're afraid to speak up. Um, Kristen's favorite teacher was Danita Brown, and she after Kristen had gone through, she had her in the second grade and the third grade, and then Danita started teaching the third grade reading lab, and because she loved making sure the kids could read. That was her goal in life, was making sure these kiddos could read. And the worse their circumstances were, the better she liked to be with them. And she joined our rope team when we were teaching people about Common Core going across the state of Oklahoma. And she knew that she was risking her job, but she was like, if they fire me, they fire me. And she came under, she took it. She just took it, and she was like, and it was about age appropriate teaching, the importance of the teaching being age appropriate, which all this stuff, I mean, it wasn't even close to pornography in schools at that particular time. It was like before that. I mean, we did talk about pornography when we repealed Common Core, but the schools weren't quite there yet. And you know, her whole, she just was able to take it. But she was one of those great teachers that she eventually had to leave because of cancer. But just the good teachers that are being robbed of the ability to just teach and inspire and build those students
And be creative.
and
Just be creative.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, there's kind of a double-edged sword there about the creativity, because when you, on the one hand, when you provide curriculum, and I'll talk about curriculum here in just a minute, but when you provide the curriculum to teachers, you know what they're teaching.
Right.
But if the curriculum is bad, which again, I'll talk about that in just a minute, then you want the teachers to be able to have the freedom to be able to, you know, do what they know that the
Turn it
kids
into
need.
good. Right.
Yeah. So a couple of stories. I have somebody who used to be a friend of mine, and she was teaching in a local district, and she went in to talk to her principal. They had adopted a curriculum 3 years prior, and her and her teammates, they were all certified. They were all traditionally certified, and all master teachers, have been teaching for years, all experienced. Well, they were having problems with the curriculum, and the kids were actually, they weren't seeing any improvement in their reading scores and their outcomes. So she went to go talk to the principal, and the principal, she said, you know, we want the freedom to be able to add to the curriculum, and to be able to supplement what we're doing in order to be able to try to get the outcomes up. And the principal told her, said, don't you change a thing. You continue doing what you're doing. You use that curriculum with fidelity, and you don't do anything different. And she said, you know, I just knew at that point I was going to have to just resign my position, because I'm being told to use a curriculum that is not working, and the kids are not growing, and I know what needs to be done, and I'm not being given the freedom to be able to do that. And so she quit. She resigned. She said, it's obvious that they're not going to let me do what I know that needs to be done. And so I think that's what's happening. And to that point, when she said that, that just confirmed the suspicions that I had. That you think about, we adopt in Oklahoma every 6 years a new curriculum. Well, if you are only adopting every 6 years a new curriculum, the curriculum companies are losing money. Plus, if your curriculum is 100% on point and doing what it needs to be done when you use it with fidelity, then you don't need all of the extra interventions and other things, unless, you know, you've got kids that need those interventions. But you don't have to buy the computer programs for every kid. You don't have to buy the booklets for all the kids. You don't have to do all of this extra stuff. It's the curriculum that they're providing for you does the job if the teachers are using it correctly. When you have to supplement the curriculum with something else to make sure that the kids are learning how to read, it's not good curriculum. And so we've got to do a better job in Oklahoma about ensuring that the curriculum that we're purchasing and providing to our teachers is good curriculum and can get the job done. Otherwise, we're going to be in a position where we're going to continually be behind. We're going to continually need to be supplementing. I think about whenever I was in the classroom in the early 90s, and the kids in my classroom, even the kids that you know, maybe were struggling at the beginning of the year, I had 98%, you know, passing the test in the 90s. And then, of course, we were using pass skills, right? Deep, not wide. And so when we went to OAS, which is Common Core, modified a little bit, I think, it is wide and not deep. Well, when you go wide and not deep, your kids are not going to get the foundations that they need in order to move on to the next year. And then when you take the standards and you push them down into the grade level below and call that rigor, that is not rigor.
No.
You know, deep thinking and being able to reason and use logic to figure something out. that is rigor.
Oh,
Harder standards for the sake of pushing them down to where they're not developmentally appropriate. That is not rigor. And so we have a lot of work in Oklahoma that needs to be done. I mean, we've talked about several different pieces here. The curriculum, we need to make sure we're getting good curriculum to the teachers. We need to make sure that the standards are deep, and we need to make sure that they are developmentally appropriate. And we need to make sure that kids are not being shoved onto a computer for 90 minutes when they're emerging readers. Pre-emerging readers do not need to be learning on a computer. They need a teacher face-to-face. They need someone who is correcting them and guiding their instruction and their learning as they go. And we're seeing the move away from that. The more technology we put in the classroom.
And statistically, I mean, there are studies that show you learn more from reading out of a book than you do on a computer screen. If the goal is academics, what are we even doing? They need to put the computers away. As a matter of fact, I've said since they had them in the classrooms, the computers are for collecting data. We don't need computers. The student the student longitudinal database is ridiculous and a waste of money. And we don't need to have our children's information on a superhighway. Sorry. And that's what the computers are for, and why they want the kids to do everything on computer. And it needs to, we need to go back to teaching skills, teaching people, educating the true meaning of the word.
Well, just go back to the 3 modalities of learning, the 3 ways that kids learn, whether it's kinesthetic, auditory, or I just went blank.
Visual. Is it visual?
Visual, right. Okay, so if you're learning on a computer, you're not getting the other 2. You're not getting the auditory, unless, of course, you have earphones and you're listening to it. But you're not getting the kinesthetic, which you go back to the fine motor skills with the handwriting skills that kids are not being taught in some school districts, because you've got to have fine motor skills in order to be able to do some of that work. I mean, think about your surgeons. What do they have to have? They have to have those fine motor skills. And other people who work with their hands, they've got to have those fine motor skills, the fine and the gross motor skills. They're not getting that if they're not getting the handwriting. They're not getting the auditory input if they're reading something off of a computer. They're not getting the kinesthetic learning if they're not taking notes. And, that's the way you get kids to learn, is to be able to give them, all 3 ways of taking information in, especially like of course, your gifted kids, they're going to be able to learn no matter how you educate them. But I mean, I don't think you're growing gifted skills. I haven't done a whole lot of research into it, but I don't think you're growing those gifted skills in kids if they're not getting all 3 of those modalities either. So, there's just so many problems that are so much wrong with teaching using technology and not that one-on-one, the verbal skills, socialization of kids.
Well, I did kind of a deep dive into that when my kids were little, and I studied with a guy. I went to multiple of his conferences. He kind of travels around, and he just crunched like brain activity at the neural pathway level. And he actually said in all of these conferences, and this is before, really way before the schools became so integrated with all these computers, he said, when you're learning off a computer screen or you're reading off an iPad, this is even before iPads, but he said the neural pathways that are created in your brain are not the same. They're not as strong, they're not as big, they're not as long lasting as pen and paper, physical, tangible things. They actually at the base level of your brain, they create a different, they make your brain actually more dense and make it stronger. I mean, It's just, but yet we just continue this pathway.
Yeah. I mean, the research shows you listen to it, you take notes, and you're using 2 different modalities there. And I mean, that's the way you learn. I mean, my mother, my mom, she went through program to become one of the very first female electronic technicians for the DoD. And one of the things that she would tell me whenever I was little, when she was going through that, is math is learned through the point of a pencil. And I mean, everything, pretty much everything is learned through the point of a pencil. And if you're not using both of those modalities, you are lessening the likelihood, like you said, you're lessening the likelihood that it's going to be retained long term. Yep. So
Right.
all kinds of issues if we could just get people to listen.
Well, and so you were on the education committee in the House, and then so tell me your teaching background. I know you were a teacher and then administrator. So tell me your background, and then tell me if you kind of know why, and I know why you are no longer on the education committee, because you asked too many questions. I'm pretty sure that's what the problem was. But the fact that you're no longer on the education committee just speaks volumes with the shenanigans going on at the State House, sadly, especially in education. But what is your background?
So I did my student teaching in 1992. I had dropped out of college for a little bit because I couldn't figure out really what I wanted to do. So I have some criminal justice background. I have some law enforcement administration. I have sociology, psychology, and I think that's pretty much, yeah, those four. I have a minor in sociology. And so when I went back to college, I went back with the intention of finishing up my degree and getting my teacher certification. So I did my student teaching when I was pregnant in 1992, and got my first teaching job in 94, I think. So I've been in and out of the classroom. I stayed home a little bit when I had my oldest, and then whenever I had my youngest, I stayed home a little bit with him too. And then I actually had to take a physical health break from teaching for a little bit. Went to work at Chesapeake for a year and a half as a tax accountant. But anyway, so I've got 17 years in the classroom, 30 years as a certified educator. And so a lot of, some of that time I spent actually subbing and being in PTA and PTO. And even if I wasn't in the classroom, I was still involved in education in some way. So I've been in urban classrooms. I've been in rural classrooms. I've been in suburban classrooms. And so I've got lots of different types of education history, dealing with different community groups and dealing with different learners. And so I've seen all kinds of things in my 30-year history of being in education. And then, of course, I was a principal intern for a year and a half whenever I ran for office and became a legislator. So 30 years worth of education history of some type or another. I have my master's degree in administration. And
that is amazing. All that experience in all those different areas. And because you ask questions, and because, and that, like I said, that's just my opinion, that is why you're no longer there. But that is amazing to me that they don't want to answer. They don't want to ask questions, reasonable questions about any of the stuff that's being pushed in Oklahoma. And it's just laughable that they have somebody there that they have people that are not educators on the education committee, and you're no longer there. It's just
well, Julia, one of the things that I have learned over my career as a whole is that there are some people who are above you in position, not stature,
Right.
you know what I mean.
Right.
That if you know more than they do, they don't want you around because you can expose their hypocrisy or their lack of knowledge and understanding. And so when you've got somebody who, like you said, are going to ask questions or push back or, you know, go call somebody out,
Right.
they don't want you around. And so I don't know, maybe that's why I was taken off education. And here's what's really interesting is that I'm not on the education committee, the Common Ed, but I am the vice chair of higher ed. But I'm not on the education A and B committee.
Well, because they
And
want to spend money recklessly.
well, when, you know, I mean, sometimes when you make people mad, they want to move you, they want to get rid of
Right.
you. And so that's kind of my suspicion. I don't know if that's really what happened or not, but that's what I suspect happened whenever I started my push against the books and you know, started calling schools out for that. You know,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's been backroom conversations with the 3 and 4 letter groups that have said, you know, don't allow her, whatever, don't let her do this, you know, don't
Right.
run her legislation or whatever. I've spent 2 years. I mean, my pushback on all of this, I've spent 2 years not getting anything to the governor's desk. And I sometimes I think, you know, maybe it's because I've pushed so hard. But I'm sorry. I'm going to protect kids and I'm going to
Right.
protect parents. And if that means that I don't get any, I mean, we've got too many laws anyway. We've got some that need to be repealed.
Right.
And so if I don't get anything done, other than just getting the message out and getting the word out to parents, then, you know, I feel like my job's been done. I mean,
Right.
waking up parents is really I just keep telling the groups, grassroots is where it's gonna get things done. And we've got to get more parents awake. We've got to get more people involved. And the more people we get involved, the more impact we're going to have. And we can make sure, you know, you hear all the time, oh, that's not happening in Oklahoma. Okay. All right, good. If it's not happening in Oklahoma, I'm fine with that. But how about let's run some bills and run some legislation to make sure that it doesn't get here. You know, we talk all the time about prevention in medicine, and we know why we don't get to do like 5% of all of medicine that's done is prevention. Everything else, the 95% is actually just treating symptoms. And so you think about if we would spend that 95% on prevention, whether it's education or the medical field or whatever, think about how healthy everyone would be and think about how smart everyone would be. We need to make sure that what we're doing is tackling the issues before we see it coming. If we see it in other states, we need to go, okay, what do we have to do in Oklahoma to make sure that doesn't come here? And we just have some people that are not willing to tackle those issues. They're not willing to stand up and go, yes, what do we have to do? I mean, we weren't able to get a drag queen bill across to the governor's desk this year.
Unbelievable.
You would think supermajority. Why could we not get a drag queen bill across to the governor's desk? Why is that?
Exactly. 80% in the House and Senate. There is no possible excuse except that a whole lot of our Republicans are just Democrats that changed their party to win in Oklahoma. But even the ones that have been Republicans their whole lives, they just cave. And I just either they're, I don't know, but it's a mess.
Well, they don't want to take responsibility for it.
Yeah. And this
You know,
past year
if they have to admit that it's happening or it's coming, then they have to take responsibility, and they don't want to take responsibility. I mean, I've told Julie and Jenny this multiple times, but on our campaign path, when we were running for school board, I would go to someone's house, knock on their door. I would show them one of the book reports that Janelle did. And this is a book in my daughter's class. and I'd say, this is in my daughter's class, and just tell me what you think about it. They're like, that's not happening here. You're lying. They literally tell me I'm lying because they don't want to take responsibility. I'm like, this is my daughter's class. I can show you her syllabus where it says, here's the book that she's got to read. But, honestly, you had a group of people that were, they were upset, but you had another group that's so disconnected. They don't want to admit that it's happening or it's coming.
Yeah. See, and and that's that other piece that I was saying about the superintendents. If the superintendents would say, I don't think it's happening in our school, but you know what, I'm going to check.
Yeah.
And if it is, I'm going to take care of it. Okay. That's transparency. Why are the parents, why would you deny and call somebody a liar? Because the question should be, you know what, I'm going to go to my school tomorrow, and I'm going to go into the library. I'm going to ask them to go in the library. I'm going to ask them to give me access to you should be able to get online and look at the books that are available in the library. Anybody can do it if they've got the website to go look at the books in the library. And so rather than just saying flat out, that's not happening, it should be, you know what, how do I check that out for myself? What do I need to do? And that's the education piece that we need to be doing, is to say, here's the link to your school's library list. Go look for yourself. Go check it out. If you think you don't believe me, go look for yourself. But people don't want to do that. It's that liberty being taken care of piece. It's that people don't want to have to do the research. They just want somebody to tell them what's happening. And that's part of the reason why mainstream media is getting has got so many people believing them, because they're telling the story that they want. Hang on. They're telling the story that they want everybody to hear. And people are believing it, and they're not going and doing their due diligence to see if what they're saying is actually true. And so we've got to get more people that are willing to do more background work and do more checking for themselves and just verify,
Well, and I want to say, I appreciate so much. I mean, you were so willing to help us do all of this. And when we started bringing this, the information about the books and all that, I appreciate you so much for sitting down with us for hours and then trying to take it to the Attorney General and here and there and get something done about it. Once it was all uncovered, and you did your own research and all of those things. And I applaud you for that, because that is not usually the response we get. We get a lot of runaround, but
well, my campaign promise from the very beginning was kids and families first. And yes. I've got a friend of mine who is a librarian in a school district somewhere in the city, not Oklahoma City Public Schools, but somewhere in the city. And she sent me a picture out of that book, Gender Queer. And I was like, what are you sending me? And then she started telling me the story, and I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, it was something I was like, I can't turn my back on that. And then the next thing I know, I've got all kinds of people coming to me going, look at this, and, what can we do about this? And I've really been surprised at how many doors have been closed in my face, so to speak, about the issue. People, I guess because of how litigious people are, they're afraid of the ACLU and some of the other organizations that are going to come against them. But I'm sorry,
Yeah, you do the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And it's not about banning books. It's about making sure that the books that are in the school is appropriate for the consumption of the age of the kids. And, we've got to make sure that people understand that it's not about banning books. It's about making sure that the content is age appropriate.
Right.
Period.
And we've even had one Republican representative that basically accused parents of lying about it, and accused Superintendent Walters of making it up. And then when Walters sent him the actual information, then he said he was passing out porn. Like, what? That is insane.
Yeah.
That is just crazy.
It's the hypocrisy.
It's
the
so
hypocrisy.
hypocritical. And so his stance is, I'm for public ed. Well, that's not education. Sorry, that is anti-education. That actually damages kids' ability to learn. So I'm tired of them calling that education, because it is
Yeah.
the opposite.
Well, and I found a report on some research that was done at one of the universities in Ohio, and the study was actually on pornography and how it impacted the college students, and it was really very telling to me that the kids, they were talking about how it was distracting from their studies. They are so addicted to it, and it is a drug. I mean, it produces the same brain response, dopamine, I think, the same brain response as taking drugs does. And so the responses from the kids were, it's keeping me from socializing. I have shame about it because I know it's wrong. I'm having trouble dating because of those issues with pornography. And everybody wants to deny it, but it truly is and can serve as a gateway drug into other things. And I mean, it can lead to, promiscuity, and it can
causes impotency in young men. And when I was the director of our pregnancy center here in Yukon, one of the things we learned about was just the fact that because they have such access, like on their phone, it's just, flip, 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 that the men that were 20 years older had less impotency problems than the younger men, because they started so young. And I mean, and let's face it, this is all coming from these people that want to depopulate the world. Well, that'll do it. That's part of it. And it's like it all leads to the same demise.
Yeah. In talking with some people in my district, I had someone tell me that there's in my district a little 9-year-old girl who is or was at the time. I haven't heard any kind of story about where she's at now, but at the time she was addicted to lesbian porn. And the fact that it's lesbian doesn't matter, whatever.
Right.
It's just pornography, and she's 9 years old, and she shouldn't have access to it. And so part of my next piece is going to be educating parents on how to educate their kids on how to use technology responsibly. I look back now, and I had a conversation with my own children about this, and like, I'm sorry that I gave you a computer and a telephone and didn't block those things that needed to be blocked and do my due diligence, not thinking about what they had access to at the time. I was naive, and and frankly, I was ignorant. And so, I want to be able to educate parents now on the problems with handing a child a cell phone, because one of the arguments that you hear people say when you talk about pornography and limiting the books the pornographic books in the school, one of the things that they say is, well, they've got a computer in their hand that they have access to. And it's like, that's on the parents. That is the parents' responsibility to ensure that they are educating the kids and putting the blocks on it and making sure that their children can't access that stuff on their phones. Of course, there's all kinds of back doors. And the mere fact that our telephone companies are not being held responsible for that is really kind of disgusting, actually. Anyway, so that's one of my next things, is just educating parents to make sure that they understand what they're doing when they're giving a child a phone, and that if they are not educating them and then putting the blocks on there to make sure that they can't get have access to it, then they're just as responsible. But we shouldn't be paying for those books with taxpayer dollars in our schools.
Right. And then giving them the whole, even just the education standpoint, that they learn better from books than they do from computers. You would think that somebody would care about that. Even stop using computers for, hand them a book, hand them a coloring book, hand them something
Well,
other than that.
I think, Julia, for as conservative as we are, a lot of conservatives, especially real Christian conservatives, that are kind of non-confrontational, but you've got the other end of the spectrum with these groups of people that are completely bought and sold into these things. I mean, they're aggressive. They don't stop. They're very loud. They're very, agitating. I'm sure Sherrie has faced her fair share of those type of people, but that's a nonstop, growing larger, in my opinion, group.
Louder.
They're very loud, and I don't know how we deal with that. As Christians, conservatives, you don't want to have to fight them necessarily.
Yeah. Did you get that? Did you get that picture that I sent you?
Yeah. Let me.
Pull that up.
I'll put it in here.
Yeah. Those are the people that call themselves tolerant and loving.
Yes. And that called the Moms for Liberty a hate group.
Yeah. I mean, look at that one girl, the black t-shirt. That's one of those Satan t-shirts from Target.
Oh, Baphomet. I asked if they had Baphomet t-shirts on.
Yep.
They did.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, where was this? Was this in DC?
This was Philadelphia.
This was at
the Moms for Liberty conference.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's videos too. You can go on Billboard Chris and Moms for Liberty Twitter, and see some of the videos of these young women right here screaming, "F you," and leave. We don't want you here, and you don't belong here. And I'm thinking, okay, so you are saying that you are the tolerant ones, and that they have they feel like they have the right, which they do. They have the right to protest. But don't tell me that I don't have the right to be somewhere, because my rights are secure with the First Amendment, just the way theirs are. And so it's really kind of, it's so very hypocritical. And, they tell us they call us a hate group. The Moms for Liberty group, a hate group, and yet I don't see any love there. Do you?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, and some of the things, I mean, they even threatened the Canadian county to come and protest at the Canadian county Moms for Liberty meeting when Superintendent Walters was our guest speaker, and none of them showed up, but they were trying to intimidate. I mean, that's how they operate. And I'm sorry, I've never been afraid of things that, in hindsight, I sometimes thought, oh, I probably should have been afraid of that a little bit. But
well, I will tell you, the police presence in Philadelphia was very, very heavy. And, one of the things that I made sure that I did every time, when we were walking out, when we left the hotel and would go wherever it was we were going to go sightseeing or to get something to eat, I thanked all of those police officers for being there, because they were putting their safety, putting themselves in harm's way. I mean, I know it's their job, but they're still putting themselves in a very vulnerable position with the protesters out there, and you never know what they're going to be capable of, and so I made sure that I thanked them every time we walked past them and told them thank you. And, there were many of them that, we had conversations with, and they were like, we appreciate what you're doing. We support you. We are behind you 100%. And, thank you for standing. So,
well, and the fact that a lot of them were wearing masks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now that's the real reason for the masks. That's the real reason. So that you don't naturally assume that it's a criminal because they've got a mask on, but they are. It is.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was one person that pretty much had control of the microphone with the protesters. And and it was a trans female, I think, from what I could tell. But the comment was that he kept saying, or she, or whatever. I heard, because I heard it several times. So there's no telling how many times this person said it. But the comment was, "You can come suck my trans,
Wow.
male part."
Wow.
Lovely.
And I'm thinking, okay, and we are supposed to trust you to make the decisions. I mean, I'm not saying this person was a
For
teacher,
children.
but
Right.
this person is saying that they're advocating for kids, and yet they're saying things like that in front of children, and then thinking that they're trying to change our minds about us advocating for children as parents.
Right.
It's really nonsensical completely.
It
So
really is. Well, it's the Isaiah, is it Isaiah 5? Woe to those who call good evil and evil good. Yeah, that's what's happening all the time.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
secular.
it is. It is. And the Moms for Liberty, that's really all they want. They just, I keep saying I'm a member. So,
Yeah.
we just want to ensure that when we send our children to school, that they are going to be treated well, and that the transparency is going to be there. And that if God forbid, that there's any kind of mental health issues or concerns, that those are shared with the parents and not hidden from them.
Right.
I mean, that's really what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, Sherrie, we are 36 minutes over. I knew we would be. We had too much to talk to you about. I almost picked up my phone a few times, and it's like, oh, I'll just talk to her when she's on the show. But thank you so much for spending time with us this morning. And Friday, our podcast is going to be Major Adam Flowers, who is Canadian County Sheriff's Department, and he bills himself as the most popular 13-year-old girl on the internet. And the last time, he's over the sex crimes division.
Yes.
And the last time I talked to him, he had a 100% conviction rate.
That's amazing.
So he is all about stopping predators. And so I'm looking forward to that show, and it will dovetail so much on a lot of the things that we've talked about. It's our society just going downhill, and the people that are in place to stop it and turn it around. I mean, we've got to turn it around. And like I said, I think Moms for Liberty will certainly be instrumental, because I expect us to turn it around. I don't expect to go down with the ship.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I think that we can be thankful for is, and I think about, there were 650 of us inside that or 700 of us inside that building advocating for kids and parents' rights.
Right.
There were, a handful, maybe 100 people outside yelling at a building. And so when you think about, it's a 7-to-1, that's a 7-to-1 ratio. So that means that there's more of us than there are of them. And so that's what we just have to keep remembering, is that the minority is just really, really loud and really, really rude. And just, not, they're being misguided. And, we've got to keep praying for them. That was one of the things that we did a lot of, was praying for the people outside, that their eyes would be open, and just see that, they're doing more harm than good. So just be encouraged that there are more of us.
Absolutely. And what you're talking about, the praying for your enemies, and people are, that seems to be hard to do. And it used to be hard until somebody explained to me, when you pray a blessing, you're saying that you hope that their life completely lines up with God's will for their life. And that makes it so easy to pray blessings on your enemies, because if their life lines up with God's will, that's a win-win for everybody across the board. And it makes it real easy to pray for your enemies, or those that are your adversaries.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, I think the scripture says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And so, and really as Christians, that's what it's all about for us, is that we want people to come to Christ. We don't want them to go, to hell. We don't want them burning.
I don't want them to
No.
die and go to hell. I want them
No.
to live and go to heaven.
I mean, you go back and look at that picture, those people do not look joyful.
No.
And so therefore, when you accept a life of following Christ and seeking his will, then, I mean, you truly are that joyful warrior that the Moms for Liberty group, the leaders talk about. And so, if we can get them, to know Christ, then, think about what incredible warriors those people would be for kids and for parents and for education and for the Lord too, if they would actually be on the right side of the issues.
Yeah. Spend that energy for good. That would be so great.
Yep. So we just have to keep praying that they see the light.
Yes, absolutely. Well, on that note, and always a pleasure to visit with you, Sherrie. Always.
You
And
too.
Michael, you're going to have to take us out of here because
we'll have to have Sherrie back on also just to talk about the tax credit, because we didn't even touch on that. But
and we didn't even get to the legislation that was passed.
Yeah. Jenny will want to be in on all that.
Okay. Well, you just tell me when, and I'm there.
All right.
All right.
Thank you
Yes,
so
ma'am.
much.
Okay.
Well,
See y'all
thanks so
later.
much, Sherrie.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.